Good day, everyone. We are from Group 7 and we are going to present our commercial group assignment. Before that, we would like to express our gratitude to Professor Nazli for all the consideration given. And my name is Charunee. Along with me is my team members, Shao Wei, Zakwan, and Iman Safiah. And in this presentation, we will focus on several items. First, the applicability of SOGA regarding the sale of good contract in cyberspace. Second is the provision cover online transaction under SOGA and effectiveness of SOGA toward e-commerce. Third is the regulatory framework governing e-commerce in Malaysia. And lastly, regarding the suitability of contract of supply for service in SOGA in Malaysia. And now I will pass to the next presenter.
So for the introduction, the Sale of Goods Act 1957 is one of the statutes of great significance in consumer purchases beside the Contract Act 1950. So SOGA actually applies to the sale of goods in Peninsular Malaysia, excluding the states of Penang and Malacca. The Act was later revised in 1990 to include Penang and Malacca within its application. Next, Section 2 of the SOGA 1957, it provides the meaning of goods, which includes physical and movable things and involve all chattels personnel other than things in action and money. In short, goods include tangible, movable properties. Thus, the SOGA focuses on protecting buyers and its primary purpose of a contract of sale of goods involving the transfer of ownership regardless of whether they deal with goods bought and sold as a business or a personal transaction. However, its sustainability has been questioned in today's society as the rules in SOGA only provide the least protection, especially an unequal economic power between the parties when it involves business and consumer transaction. At the same time, it brings to our attention that SOGA does not mention the supply of goods and also services. Now I move on to the next presenter.
To begin, the applicability of SOGA 1957 regarding the sale and goods contracts in cyberspace is one of the crucial parts in our assignment. The SOGA 1957 most likely applies to e-commerce as there are no express or implied provisions that forbid the sale of goods on the internet. For instance, the sale by the description in Section 15 of SOGA 1957 is a necessarily implied condition whereby this provision implies the exact conformity of the goods delivered. This section is significant as the buyers merely rely on the retailer's description on the website, allowing all online sales by specifications to be classified as sales. When an e-consumer buys an item by description from the online seller, it establishes an implied condition that the goods shall be of merchantable quality as stated in Section 16 Clause 1B of SOGA 1957. Goods of merchantable quality can be understood in Wilson and Rickett, Cockrell and Company Limited, whereby the court held that the consignment as a whole was unmerchantable as it has defects, making it unit for burning. By applying these two provisions in online contracts, if the goods received by the buyer is not in accordance with the description on the website, the buyer has the right to repudiate the contract and claim for damages. This can be affirmed in Clarence Masturbations M. Sendirian Berhad and Prestige Dynamics Industries Sendirian Berhad, whereby there was a clear breach of that condition in the place order, and it is submitted that SOGA 1957 is vital in ensuring the item's quality, regardless of whether it is bought via online shopping or physical shopping. Nevertheless, Section 62 SOGA 1957 can work extremely harsh towards e-consumers for unsatisfactory quality or inadequate goods which deprive their rights to claim. In addition, SOGA 1957 emphasized the issue of delivery in an online transaction, whereby Section 2 of SOGA 1957 define delivery and there are various ways of delivery of goods once the seller has accepted the payment of consumers. For instance, if the buyers order the goods within Malaysia, the sellers may adopt postal company services such as Post Laju, JNT Express, Skynet, and ABX Express. However, if there is no express term regarding the delivery time, the sellers are required to deliver within a reasonable time. For instance, Section 33 of the SOGA 1957 provides that the delivery of goods sold can be made by any method so long as the parties agree to trade as delivery in the means that the delivery has an effect of putting the goods in possession of the buyer or any person authorized to hold them on his behalf. For instance, the buyer can buy the ticket online and e-book via the internet. Thus, failure to deliver the goods by the seller will contribute to a breach of contract. Besides, Malaysia has other statutes or laws that regulate e-commerce. As you can see on the screen right now, these are the regulatory framework governing e-commerce in Malaysia, such as Contracts Act 1950, Direct Sales and Anti-Pyramid Scheme Act 1993, Consumer Protection Act 1999, so on and so forth. Now I will pass to the next presenter, Shao Wei.
Thank you, Zakwan. So moving on to the suitability of contract for supply of service in SOGA 1957. Contract of sale of goods is an agreement entered between seller and buyer whereby the seller agrees to transfer the property in goods to the buyer for a consideration by following to Section 4 of SOGA 1957. On the other hand, the contract for the supply of services basically focus on the service in a trade, whereby the supplier will offer and provide specific articles or services to the consumers. Next. Malaysian SOGA 1957 is modeled based on UK Sales of Goods Act 1893. Instead, this act has been superseded by SGA 1979, which undergoes several amendments to align with the commerce trends in the 21st century. In UK, the promulgation of new law, Consumer Rights Act 2015, mainly focused on the consumer sale. Next. The insertion of a certain provision under CRA, i.e. Part 1, Chapter 1, covers the sales of goods and supply of goods and service under B2C transaction, which aims to protect the purchaser's rights. Sections 48 to 57, Chapter 4, governs the contract to supply a service. Although CRA does not define the term service, it is wide in nature, which covers various services. CRA also removed the word implied term, which simply means that a trader must apply and supply and perform a service with reasonable care and skill, reasonable price, and reasonable time. CRA also provides additional remedy for the consumers to repeat performance under Section 55 when there is a breach of exercising reasonable care and skill by the trader, and another remedy is price reduction under Section 56 if the trader fails to perform the service within a reasonable time. And there is also a right to information about the trader or services to be binding and the relation to other law on contract terms. In Malaysia, SOGA 1957 is an act concerning B2B and B2C transactions and only for sales of goods contract. This act is silent on the contract for supply of service, and there's no definition or definition found in SOGA 1957. It only covers implied terms for the contract for sales of goods, i.e. Sections 12 to Section 17. If we look at another legislation, which is Consumer Protection Act 1999, this act regulates the contract for the supply of service. And Section 3 defines the meaning of service as a benefit, facility, right, or privilege that has been granted under any contract of service. And there are several implied guarantees regarding the supply of services under Part 8 of CPA. Section 53 states an implied right for consumers to enjoy the service provided with reasonable care and skill. The degree of care and skill required in the supply of service contract is determined by the test of reasonable skill and care under the law of negligence. And this is affirmed by Boland case and Jet International Limited. Besides that, the implied guarantee of services must fit a particular purpose pursuant to Section 54. Next. Furthermore, there is an implied guarantee to the service under contract to be delivered within a reasonable time under Section 55, and also implied right that consumer only pays a reasonable price to the supplier under Section 56. So the further explanation can be referred in the slide or the full assignment. So next. To make a small conclusion, other than the contract of sales of goods, consumers often enter the contract for the supply of service in their daily life. So the law of service is important to protect consumer rights of remedy against the service provider or the trader. And unfortunately, the law of services has never been incorporated into our legislation in Malaysia, especially SOGA 1957. And there is no rights or remedies such as a right to repeat performance and right to price reduction under SOGA or CPA. Unlike UK position, the inclusive law governs both contract of sale and service in B2B and B2C transaction. Hence, we affirm that there is a wide gap in our existing SOGA on the contracts of supply of service. So I'll pass to the next presenter.
Okay, for this part, I will present twofold. First is e-commerce and second is the supply of service. First and foremost, SOGA is not incomprehensive enough to govern the e-commerce as it failed to address several issues. Therefore, it is suggested that e-commerce to have an individual legislation to govern it. For information, fraud cases have become a custom and common practice in Malaysia, especially in online transactions. The problem can occur when the seller fails to perform their part after receiving the payment. This can be seen in the recent cases regarding a famous Chinese YouTuber who commonly known as YBB. Using her influencer identity involved in scamming cases, she used her social media channel to sell branded handbags. She succeeded in selling to multiple buyers, take the deposit, but never send out the goods. Besides, the current SOGA also failed to address the issue of right to reject, refund, and cancel the item. Therefore, the new legislation should have a proper guideline that deal with such rights. It is acknowledged that the buyer can seek for their right under CPA. However, in certain circumstances, they will buy the item or stock for their business purposes, which reselling the item instead of personal use. In this situation, people cannot rely on CPA to protect their right as they are not fall under the category of consumer. Moving on to the next slide, please. Regarding the supply of service, it is suggested that the current SOGA to have an amendment by creating a specific part for supplies of service. As mentioned before, CPA does not apply to B2B transaction. Thus, the aggrieved party does not have the right to sue the default party. Hence, it is a must to set a guideline to determine the standard of service. And now I will pass to the next presenter.
Thank you, Charunee. So, as a conclusion, the global is keep changing every second in order to establish a better world, and the scope of the provision also may change following the new trend of the country. Therefore, it is a must of the authority to keep updating the law and conducting some surveys on whether the law is applicable and parallel to society's need. Therefore, SOGA 1957 should be amended by inserting provision that concerning the supply of services. The motivation to reform SOGA 1957 is necessary to boost consumers' confidence in traditional sales of contract, e-commerce, contract for sale, for supply of services, which may develop the country's economy. At the same time, there are ambiguities in SOGA which might not be suitable fully applied to e-commerce. Thus, e-commerce should definitely have specific and individual legislation that governs it to provide justice and fairness towards the people. So before we end, due to the time limit, we do not present some of the parts. Therefore, Doctor may kindly refer to our full assignment for further information. Thank you.